Senator Jaffer on debate.
Yes, thank you. Honourable Senators, I rise today to speak to Bill S-211, an act to enact the Modern Slavery Act and amend the customs tariff. J'aimerais remercier l'honorable Senator.
I would like to thank Honourable Senator Julie Miville-Deschênes for sponsoring this important bill. And remind you that, as the Senator mentioned several times in her speech, this bill is only a first step.
About a 15-year-old girl from Bangladesh called Biti. Biti worked with thousands of Bangladeshi children, piecing together designer jeans destined for stores in Canada and other developed countries. She remembered her first day of work at the garment factory 3 years ago, when she was just 12 years old. And I quote, "The first day I felt bad. I thought it wasn't good. That first day I cried. When I see other girls in their blue and white checkered school uniforms, my heart breaks. But now I just dream of standing on my own feet." Close quotation. In Biti's case, abject poverty and a sick father forced her parents to send her to the garment factory. In 2014, more than 406 companies imported textile and apparel goods similar to products Biti works on into Canada. Desperate girls like Biti are pushed to work for very low wages, and some are brought into these industries under the false promises of earning decent wages, meals, training, and schooling. The International Labour Organization estimates that there are over 150 million child laborers globally and 25 million victims of forced labor worldwide. Women and girls make up 71% of victims. A study released by World Vision Canada stated that 1,200 companies in Canada imported goods at risk of being produced by child labor and forced labor. In 2018, the Subcommittee on International Human Rights of the House of Commons, Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development, undertook a study on child labor in supply chains, and it stated, and I quote, "Virtually no progress was made globally between 2012 and 2016 to end child labor. Furthermore, there has been no change in the number of children subject to forms of modern slavery." Close quotation. Honourable Senators, these children are not only missing out on education, on reaching their potential and enjoying their childhood, but they are being enslaved and mistreated, and many are working in hazardous conditions just to afford food for their families. Honourable Senators, from the products we use to the clothes we wear, how many involve using children to make them? In 2016, Canada imported $39 million worth of coffee from Honduras. 11-year-old Melvin works in a coffee farm in Honduras. He has been working there for 4 years. His father was killed when he was a baby, which is why Melvin, at age 7, stepped up to be a breadwinner of his family. He recounts that, and I quote, "Back when I started, it was more difficult to cut coffee because my hands were not tough." Close quotations. Melvin works 12 hours a day, and his hands have toughened to cut the coffee. Honourable Senators, do we know if the coffee picked by Melvin has ended up in our stores? We know the supply chain is complicated and can include many touch points, and it is very difficult to follow. For example, coffee beans might grow and be harvested in one place, travel elsewhere to get roasted, travel again to be packaged in a different facility, and continue to travel to other places before being shipped to Canada. It is only through transparency, close monitoring, and reporting that we can tell if the coffee beans Melvin picked are sold at our local grocery store. The proposed modern slavery bill today tackles the issues of child labor and forced labor with the aim of ending such practices. It requires large Canadian companies to ensure that their supply chains are transparent and don't rely on child labor. It imposes an obligation on them to report on measures taken to prevent child and forced labor. I am very glad that the bill also proposes amendments to customs tariff to ban goods manufactured or produced by child or forced labor. This bill is indeed a very good first step in realizing a much-needed improvement in workers' and children's rights. Canada should not be falling behind on its commitments to uphold human rights and end these practices. In 2017, we endorsed the UK's call to action to end forced labor and trafficking and modern slavery. In 2018, we endorsed the G20 strategy to eradicate child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery in the world of work. And as part of Canada's G7 presidency, we made similar commitments. Many countries have advanced, like the UK, the Netherlands, France, and others. Honourable Senators, it is time for Canada to also act. In 2013, after the Rana Plaza collapse and the world became aware of what is happening, Canadians rose in protest against companies implicated in violating workers' rights. More and more Canadians are taking actions, sometimes by boycotting products. But we know that boycotts are not the solution, for it puts millions out of work, adding to their poverty. So we must enact legislation to protect these workers. In 2015, when I was part of the Senate Committee on Human Rights that investigated the garment industry and corporate social responsibility in Bangladesh, we heard witnesses and experts over several meetings. What they said then is still true today. The testimony of witnesses from both the Canadian government and the civil society organizations led us to the conclusion that while Canadian government and Canadian companies have taken a number of measures to address the rights of garment workers, we still have a long way to go. Honourable Senator,
Honourable Senators, in countries across the whole world, factory workers often exploit their workers, knowing that those who are in need will always accept low wages and poor working conditions, because they do not have a choice.
Environment. They have no choice. Their families and they have to eat. As a first step in trying to correct unspeakable conditions for millions of people, Honourable Senators, I ask that we support the modern slavery bill to protect children and end forced labor. Moving forward, there is still much to be done. Let us start with Bill S-211 and continue to take the necessary steps to end modern slavery. I would like to remind you of a quote by Senator Omidwa the other day when she also spoke on Bill C-211, wherein she quoted Frederick Douglass, the famous abolitionist, and I quote, "No man can put a chain about the ankle of his fellow man without at last finding the other end fastened about his neck. Honorable Senators, it is Canadian values that needed to be applied. We as Canadians pride that we have certain values. These values now have to be applied to protect child labor and forced labor. Thank you very much.